There were definitely some interesting and some hard questions. My goodness.
Good, you got your sheet with you?
Yes, I
Okay.
have it. I actually have another screen sitting up over here to the side. So I've got a double monitor going and I've got the questions up on the screen.
All right, sounds good. Yep, I've got mine right here next to me. So maybe we'll probably go through some of these quotes as we go on, but I'll just read the first couple here for the people that are listening, if anybody's listening. So this is in relation to the movie Mr. Holland's Opus that we finished watching over the past few weeks. And there are some good ideas about vocation and some quotes from the book God at Work by Jean Edward Veith. And so just want to read a couple of these here to start things off with. So it says, a Christian and a non-Christian may labor side by side in the same job, and on the surface they are doing exactly the same thing. But work that is done in faith has a different significance than work that is done in unbelief. The doctrine of vocation helps Christians see the ordinary labors of life to be charged with meaning. It also helps put their work into perspective, seeing that their work is not saving them, but that they are resting in the grace of God, who in turn works through their labors to love and serve their neighbors. And then another one here, good works which are primarily done within vocation, or rather good works which are primarily done within vocation, are the fruits of faith. Good works are done not for God, but for the neighbor. The whole purpose of every vocation is to love your neighbor as yourself, from Matthew 22. So I think we can just go through these questions here and see what you think. So starting out with Glenn, Mr. Holland from the movie. Glenn is the character who we see has the most vocations in the film. The primary one is his vocation as teacher, which makes sense because it's about him getting a teaching job and how he changes his feelings towards that through the years. What key turning points do you see as his growth within the film?
I think the main one I saw was when he was challenged with teaching the young man in band to play the drum, where the kid has absolutely no clue in terms of rhythm, and he's given the job, basically, I won't say an ultimatum, but say, you have to teach this kid how to get the beat. And you see him go from, gosh, this is almost an impossible situation, into viewing it as a challenge and going, okay, what can I do now to get this kid engaged and get this kid to figure out what it means to find the beat in music? And I think that was a big turning point for him in attitude.
Yep, that's a good one. Certainly a major point in the movie. And there was the one before that with the girl who was trying to play the clarinet.
Trying to play the clarinet, that's true. Yeah, I forgot about that one.
Yeah, because hers, it was kind of a little different because she wanted to do really good, but she just didn't think she had the capability to do it.
Right.
And it was his job to kind of show him, no, you actually can do it if you put your mind to it.
Sure. Yeah, I'd forgotten about that one. That was a good point, too.
And then, of course, she's the one at the very end of the movie who becomes the governor and comes back and is kind of the big special guest at the farewell celebration that they have. So, and I think the point of that is that not that he directly caused her to be the governor, but that he gave her that confidence that she needed because he was doing what he was supposed to do with his vocation and enabled her to do well and serve the other people that she came in contact with later on and all that good stuff.
Be equipped to carry out her vocation later on that she would end up doing. Very much so.
Yeah, that's a couple good ones. Okay, second question here. Glenn meets Bill, the coach, in the lunch line where Bill informs him that teachers get to cut in line to get food. And is this arrogant on Bill's part or a healthy expression of how teachers in vocation are in authority over students? And for me, I know for many years when I watched this growing up, I thought that was pretty arrogant for him to just cut in line like that. And he does it in kind of a rude way, to be honest. He's like, come on, get out of my way. Let's go. Come on. after reading this book and kind of preparing for this and kind of understanding more what vocation is and how they all work together, I can understand now why he did it. He probably still did it in a rather rude way. He probably could have been nicer in how he said it, but it does make sense how he's saying that high school isn't a democracy and everybody isn't on an even playing field, so we don't have to wait in line. So there's ways, there's different vocations have different aspects that might give some more privileges than others, but there's also a tactful way to go about it.
Absolutely, because I was mixed with that. I thought, yes, he's showing that the Glenn's in authority here, just like he is, and he needs to exercise that right and such. But yeah, I thought it's like, okay, could have gone about it just a little bit differently in terms of tact. But yeah, just to get the point across that yes, you have authority to do these things too.
Mm-hmm. And that was kind of him getting to meet his first friend in his new teaching job, and got to talk about how he wanted to use the teaching job as a chance to compose, because he was hoping it would give him free time to compose and become a composer. And the other guy kind of laughs at him and says, "I don't remember the last time I had that was free." No. And so it's kind of the first little stepping stone to realize that things are not going to be going the way he's expecting them to go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Okay, the next one here. The ideal for the vocation of marriage can be found in passages like Genesis 2 and Ephesians 5. How well do you think Iris and Glenn are fulfilling these roles at different points in the movie? And maybe for a reference here, there's another quote that I have from that God at Work book, which says this: "The wife sees Christ hidden in her husband. She submits to him as the church submits to Christ. The husband, in turn, in his relationship with his wife, does for her what Christ has done for the church." And then this quote from Ephesians 5, "Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her." The wife's vocation is to submit to her husband. The husband's vocation is to give himself up for his wife. And that, and I'm sure we all know, is a very touchy subject, especially nowadays. I did not grow up in a church body or in a home that really taught that or really lived that out at all. So that wasn't something I ever heard about until I got to college and became an adult. But the older I've gotten, the more I understand how it works or what it's supposed to look like and the benefit for it all. But marriage is another vocation that gets explored in the movie here. So there's a couple interesting points where we can look at how the two of them are acting and ask, are they doing what we would say the godly thing is to do or not? Do you have any thoughts?
I just thought, I remember the point where Glenn and Iris figure out that Iris has brought up to Glenn that there's something wrong with their son. Mm-hmm. And Glenn's having a real tough time because he's so wrapped up in his teaching that he's having a tough time adjusting to this or seeing what she's trying to get across to him. And she's trying very much so and trying to do her vocation, but he's not doing his part in terms, or not as well as he should in terms of a father figure in his fatherly vocation to understand what's going on. Mm-hmm. So I see there's a real, she's trying really, really hard, but he's not present, if you will, in that sense for his fatherly vocation to do what needs to be done. So he's kind of missing the boat there in a couple of places with respect to that.
And I know there's a question about fatherhood later on, so maybe we'll talk about that a little later. But I know that
that's fine.
There's that difficulty accepting that he has a deaf child in the beginning. Right. Especially because music is so important to him that
right.
Yeah. There was one scene that I thought played out that biblical principle very well, where I think they both were doing what was described. is the scene just before their child is born, when he's putting the crib together in
Yeah.
their little house, little apartment, and they're talking about how they got the crib together. It was so great, and they said, "Well, we don't have any room now," and he says, "Well, what do you think if we move into a house?" She's like, "Oh no, you're
Yes.
kidding." "No, I'm serious. If we used our savings, and if I teach some driver's ed," and she's like, "But you were just going to compose this summer," and then she goes,
Uh-huh.
well, it's up to you. I think we should do it. And then she thinks that's great and everything. So I think that
Right.
scene
That
it out.
was a good scene where all that worked through.
Yep,
And
because
then
a mosquito here in my office. Because yeah, he was thinking of the bigger picture and willing to do the extra steps of what needed to be done to
sure.
make it possible. And she was willing to go along with whatever he wanted, but because of her willing to go along and him taking those extra steps, it was living that
Uh-huh.
out in a nice way. So
And that plays out too when they start working together with their son on when they're trying to work together on the education and figure out what he needs in terms of education, and you see them working together to sort all that out and learn the sign language and such. You see that happening, trying to get him into the best possible school they can get him into.
Mhm.
So yeah, there's several places where you think, wow, yeah, that's really working, and other places are like, not quite so much today.
Yeah, I know another one that was where they probably weren't working well together and stuff was when the mom and the son went to the student conference and he was at home, and she was upset that he didn't come along.
Yeah.
And then they started arguing about how he needs to do this for school, and she says, "Well, you can go ahead and write your music, do whatever you want." And he's really upset because he's like, "I don't get to write my music. I'm always doing something for somebody else, whether it's for my family or for the school." And
Right.
so there's that kind of conflict.
I agree.
Yeah. Okay, let's see here. Principal Jacobs says that a teacher has two jobs or two aspects to their vocation: fill young minds with knowledge and give those minds a compass so the knowledge doesn't go to waste. You agree?
For the most part, but that has to be tempered with something biblical to go along with it too. Knowledge is great, but there has to be the thought of a relationship with Christ to go along with that, to put into place that moral compass, if you will.
That's right.
So
There's no religion in this movie, so we don't know what
no, there's
anybody's religious
no
beliefs are. But we could say that teachers who teach at a religious Christian school and who implement that can have that extra aspect of the teaching vocation, because they're giving the knowledge, and they're showing how all of this is for the good of the neighbor, and this is how God wants the world to work, and all that sort of
right.
thing. So it gives students that compass to look to and
Sure.
understand what's the point of doing all this meaningless work that doesn't seem to do anything, or what's the point of studying and learning this stuff since I'm never going to use it anyway. And it gives that focus.
Absolutely.
Okay, and this one we've kind of touched on already a little bit. Another major vocation Glenn has in the film is that of father. How do we see his attitude change in good ways and bad from the news of his wife's pregnancy up to the end of the film? So, we did touch about that already. He was very excited and happy when the baby was first born in the hospital, and then and he's all excited thinking that his son is maybe gonna do the things that he didn't get to do and become a big famous musician in a famous concert hall. And then we get the news that his son is deaf, and so he can't know what music is in the same way that his dad does, and it's kind of not seeing the point of or the benefit of that fatherhood vocation after that point for a while, and kind of distant. And then towards the end we see that he does find a way to get music to become a part of his son's life and the lives of his classmates at the deaf school that he goes
Sure.
to. Then at the very end, when he's grown up, we find out that his son actually is a teacher, and he was given a job to teach at one school, but he's not sure if he's going to take it or not. So it turns out that all those years of fatherhood and being a teacher himself inspired his son to want to get into that role and serve people in that way as well.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting. It's like, wow, you don't know what kind of impact you're going to have. You know, you may think it's going to end up one way, and it's not that at all. But you just don't know. You don't know what God's got in mind for that.
That's right. It's like that other famous movie, It's a Wonderful Life. At the end, when Jimmy Stewart, the main character, gets to find out what life would be like if he wasn't born.
If he wasn't
all the different people that.
Sure. Yep, the same kind of idea, because you don't know what impact you're going to have. Definitely.
Let's see. What are your thoughts when the two principals, Principal Jacobs and Principal Walters, question Glenn's choice to teach rock and roll in the classroom? They have different reactions at the end of his explanation. So how well are they living out their vocation in those reactions?
So I thought it was interesting. I know, coming from a teaching standpoint for myself.
Oh, you're a teacher?
I have taught, and with what I do for Scouts, I am in with students pretty much every day of the week. So I have it's not a certified teaching role, but I am in a teaching role pretty much all the time. But for me, I like to do, within reason, whatever I think I need to do to reach the students. And if I have to reach the students by putting on a silly parrot hat and being goofy when I go in, then that's what I do. So when they talked about introducing rock and roll, there's plus and minuses to it. Rock and roll can have a very negative message coming through, but yet if you can take that and use it to reach a student, but in a tempered way, then I think that's a good thing. So, use your own kind of judgment in terms of how you throw it out there. But in terms of reactions, the real, oh my gosh, you shouldn't do this, I think that was a bit overreacting for it, because depending upon what the message is for the music they're actually using, I don't see the harm. So again, if the whole goal is to try and reach your students and connect with them, what's the problem? It's like right now, we're having to use different ways and in terms of resources to reach students now that we didn't have 20, 30 years ago. So with all the online stuff that we do now, so we're having to invent different ways to make connections with these students. So, I'd say if it works within reason and it's not a sinful approach, I don't see the problem. So,
and I think that's kind of what he gave as his answer. He said,
sure,
I'm going to teach kids to love music, and I'll use whatever kind of music I can if I think it'll help them get it. And Jacobs, the female principal, seems to understand that, and that makes sense. And Walters, the male, he isn't so happy about that. And
totally against it.
Says, rock and roll leads to a breakdown in discipline, and we need to teach, and you can't teach if there's no discipline. And it's William H. Macy really is probably the best guy to play a square person, somebody who just is very much by the book and likes everything old-fashioned and traditional. But he's done that a few times in a few movies, and he's pretty good at that. But they both understand they need to keep order in the school, and it's just a question of is the best way to do that, to let each teacher do it in the way that seems to be fit for them, but they need to keep everybody and every teacher the same. And another thing is how this was probably back in the 60s with more or less harmless rock and roll music. If this was going on now and some music teacher wanted to teach, like Slipknot or something like that, that
No,
would be a little different.
that would exactly that's my point too. At the time, the music that was going on at that time is not as toxic, for lack of a better word, than some of the stuff that's out there now.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely.
No doubt. Let's see. I think we might have talked about this one a little bit, but it says, do you think that Bill's offer to help Glenn, so the coach offering to help the music teacher, by stepping outside each other's vocations, where he, the coach, gets the band to march in exchange for Glenn teaching the no talent Lou Russ how to play the drum, if that was appropriate? And was Bill's comment, "You're a lousy teacher," appropriate? I know we talked about that a little bit, but the understanding, if you have a vocation to do, whether it's appropriate to go and do something that really isn't in your scope of vocation, and or if it's better to leave it as is, and to say to somebody in a different vocation, well, you're not doing a good job.
I don't think it's fair necessarily to say you're not doing a good job, because you're not walking in their shoes, for one thing. But to step outside one's vocation to help their fellow man do a better job with theirs, I see no problem with that at all. That's part of loving your neighbor.
Yeah, and that's what kind of ended up happening, is that little extra push is what made him inspired to go that extra mile and prove him wrong and say, no, I can teach this guy, and it worked out good. So it can be good, like you said, it can be good, but you got to be careful who you're doing.
That's right, absolutely.
Because he probably shouldn't go to the principal, his superior, and say, you're not doing a good job.
No, not at all. Not at all. You could do it with a coworker, but yeah, you wouldn't want to do it with management. No, not a good idea there. So.
Okay, this one here is a really interesting question. This is a concept I've really wrestled with for a long time. So this says, John Lennon plays a significant role in the sense of how his death affects Glenn and how two of his songs are used in the film. So how does our understanding of vocation shape our view of whether a Christian can appreciate Lennon's songs and talent, despite the fact that he presumably died unrepentant of his beliefs regarding Jesus and God and the church? So kind of putting that in a more broader context, we could say, is it appropriate for a Christian to appreciate the work and the talent of somebody who is probably in hell?
I would say you don't give them credit for having the talent, having the whatever. It was a God-given talent to them. Now the way they went about using it, if they didn't believe and they weren't using it to share God's plan, then I have some issue with that. But that's not going to stop me from appreciating the musicians that have talent like that. I look at it and go, it's a waste that they didn't, come to accept Christ as their savior. But that doesn't limit me from saying, yeah, they had some talent there, or appreciate the music. Some of the messages that go across in the music may be questionable too, so you have to think about that. But the talent, I will never not say, wow, look at that talent. So I can appreciate it, but I may not agree with exactly what they've done with it. If that makes sense.
Yep, it makes sense. And that's what I kind of came to believe after thinking and talking with some pastors about it through the years too, because there was a time when I was really struggling, because I've always loved music and I've always loved movies. And the older I got, the more I started to learn and realize that not all of these people are Christian. And I really, really liked a lot of their talent and really thought they did a good job at what they were doing. But I, would start to wonder, especially with the ones who are deceased now and presumably didn't change their beliefs before they died. They're probably in hell right now when I watch them on screen or listening to their music, and it would make me sad. And so I'd be wondering, should I be trying to make a point not to appreciate that, or not to listen to them or watch them? And I think I had a pastor friend who touched on the vocation aspect a little bit, but helped me understand that talent is God-given. It is something, we don't know the reason why God chooses to give some immensely great talent sometimes to people who are unbelievers, but none of those people were living a religious vocation. They weren't
Right.
living in the vocation of bringing people to Christ. So, it's not like they were an unbelieving pastor or anything like that. But what they
Right.
what they were doing well, and so we can appreciate that for what it is. Just the fact that they had had a good talent in the life they were living, and we can appreciate that part of it, and not have to dwell on who they were personally in their personal life, and
Yes. Sometimes that's hard to do, though. You look at the talent and you go, wow, 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 and it's hard to separate the appreciation for that versus your feelings about how they are as a person. Because I went through that with Steve Hawking,
oh sure, yeah.
and I was like, wow, and then I'm like, so talent, yes, but I just had a really, really tough time with some of the things he would say with respect to God.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, so same kind of thing there. And Lennon was one for me. I was like, it's like, look at all the talent there. And then to realize that, yeah, he not a Christian. It's like, okay. So
I heard some stories or rumors that towards the last couple of years of his life, he was interested in Christianity a little bit, or maybe had someone from the 700 Club come and talk to him. But I've heard a couple different versions of what happened then. One version I heard was that he just couldn't come around to believing in a literal fall into sin or a literal need for a savior. Or the other story that I heard was that Yoko Ono is the one who talked him out of it, because if he got really involved into it, then she would see, or he would then see God and Christ as his muse and his reason for creating, rather than seeing her as his reason for creating. So don't know exactly what happened there, but guess we'll probably never know.
now that's I'll just say that's sad and just
Hmm.
leave it at that. Wow.
Yeah, but it's definitely a concept I've wrestled with a lot for
Hmm.
earlier years in my life.
Yeah, I did too. There were some that musicians and such, and I'm like, wow, really nice, but can't go along with their lifestyle or whatever it is that they've decided to do. So yeah, been
And, some,
many for me because music's a big part of my life, and so
and sometimes for me, it's when I was younger and I was first starting to learn the personal beliefs of a lot of these people, I was surprised at how many of them aren't Christian, because I would be thinking before, oh, they've got all this talent, they've created all this wonderful stuff. How can they not believe these things that I believe? But it's part of growing up that you learn that not everybody shares the same beliefs as you.
yeah, that's true. That's true.
Right. Next one here, Principal Walters. That's William H. Macy, the one who takes the place of Principal Jacobs, the female principal. We talked about this already. He has a much different approach to his vocation than his predecessor. So is he being responsible by suggesting cutting the class play? And at the end of the film, he states, I'm not as popular as you, but I care about these students just as much as you do. And if I have to choose between Mozart and long division, I choose long division. Is this responsible? And are there any circumstances where the arts should be given higher priority than hard academic subjects?
I go back and forth on that because I think both are equally important because they both develop different aspects within the individual as the individual matures. Because if it hadn't been for the musical part of my high school era, if you will, I'd be a different person than I am now. I would not be where I am. I had a huge vocal music teacher in terms of role model for me in high school. And a lot of where I am now, I can some of the stuff I can attest to his doing. So I think, the arts do play a big role. And when they talk about cutting arts or cutting those kinds of activities, the extracurricular activities or whatever, and defunding stuff like that, makes me nervous because yes, there's room for academics, but the academic parts develop a different part of the personality than the arts do. So
it's like, because then I think Mr. Holland's response to that is, well, you can cut the arts as much as you want. Sooner or later, these people won't have anything to read or write about.
that's true. That's true.
But I like the way that you said it, that the two things are important, but they develop different parts of the person as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
That you need both in order to be a full, well-rounded person. And I grew up in a really small town that had a few different towns put together to make one school district. Very, very small. And so my school growing up didn't have a super great music program. We had a music program, and we had a one-act play and a three-act play, but we never got to perform anything that was of high caliber. And we just had one band and one choir. We didn't have a string section, but to me, it always seemed that the athletics were getting a higher emphasis in the community than the arts do. I think that's changed somewhat in the years since I've been gone, but it's still not as good as it should be. And maybe we'll talk about this later at one of the other questions, but it really made me resentful about athletics for a long time.
Sure. I can see where it would, because I think in some respects, the high school I went to, they had a big emphasis on sports and such, but yet at the same time, the vocal music department where I was had a long-standing tradition of touring throughout the world and touring at, world throughout the country, whatever it was. We would go to competitions, we would bring home medals, So I had just an outstanding choir experience.
Good.
And so we would go to contests, and we were the people to be feared because we were we had the reputation that we would be taking home the medals. And it's not just the choir itself, but the vocalists within the choir that would walk away with the medals. I being one of them, walking away with the medals and such. And we were, that's what I said. I had experiences with music and such that I had no idea that whole side of me even existed, had it not been for the annoying voice teacher that I started out with as a freshman in high school. And he kept after me to try out, and I was like, okay, I'll just try out just to appease him. And I had no idea that I had the God-given talent I had for music until I went through that. And after that, I said, well, okay, I guess I can sing. I had no idea. I mean, I guess there was a reason why I was made an alto in 4th grade when I started in junior choir. But, you don't know that until you've got an experience with that. And if those cuts are made where you don't have the opportunity to explore the arts, people like me may not even know that the talent is there, that God-given talent is there and can be developed and used to the Lord's glory.
Mm-hmm. And my wife grew up in Kenya, which has a much different education system and priorities in education than we do over here. And she's talked about how people that come over here to study in this country tend to study the hardline subjects, the maths, the sciences, and kids in school growing up there don't really have music programs and drama programs and that sort of thing. And it is a missing piece that people are missing out on, because who knows what sort of untapped talent there is in places like that, where if they had those opportunities, or if there was more of an emphasis on that and not totally just on the hardline academic subjects, that there could be some untapped resources there.
Absolutely, I agree 100%.
Right, I think we should be able to finish this up at just about the right time. Got about 4 more questions here. We see some scenes where Glenn's vocations and priorities clash and cause conflict, especially between teacher and father. Does he tend to choose the right one to prioritize, or are there any times where he should make a different choice?
We already touched on that a little bit when his son is born and he's found out his son's death. The priorities there changed a little bit, and yeah, he had to figure out that, yeah, I need to step back a little bit from the teaching aspect and put a little bit more emphasis here on what I need to do as a father. And so, but plenty of times where he does make the right choice, like we talked about earlier, where he says, well, how about let's move into a home?
Mm-hmm.
And makes the right choice there. So there's things there, in terms of teacher and father conflict, that, yeah, he does make the right choice. The time where he was supposed to go to the counseling appointment, did he make the right choice there? I'm not sure he did, because I feel like he should have been at the counseling appointment. But
the one where the wife says he wanted you to come with him, and
yes, yes. And so things like that, there are places where he didn't make the right choice then, but there are plenty of other times when he did do the right thing in terms of the choice, like at the end where he dedicates the song to his son. So did he make the right choice there? Yeah, obviously. And so there's stuff like that. Did he make the right choice in the school? Absolutely. Put a priority on his son's education, since his son was different. He needed to find what worked. So yeah, there's plenty of times when he did make the right choice, but there were some times that didn't think he made quite the right choice.
I know, and that's something they talk about at the seminary sometimes, that one teacher put it that the ministry is always going to ask from you as much as you're willing to give it. So meaning there are some times where you have to be able to tell your congregation or whatever you're doing, no, I need to spend some time with my family and do this with my family.
And I have the same thing with scouts. Scouts will give as much, it will take as much as you're willing to give, and there are times where you just have to say, I have to back off. I can't do anymore. It's the same kind of thing. And
then yet there are some examples where, that sort of vocation or occupation should be given first priority. And one of the teachers at school gave an example of where a pastor that he knew had bought tickets to an air show with one of his kids. And on the day that air show was going to happen, somebody was in his congregation was, terminally ill, or something happened where they were going to be having to go off life support pretty soon. And this person actually chose to go to the air show and either had a different pastor go in his place or maybe went to the family afterwards. But the person who was sharing the story said that was one example where he should have put the congregation first more than the time. Yeah, because,
that one is like that's kind of walking the line there. Yeah, that probably wasn't a good choice for that.
Mm-hmm.
If it had been, maybe you needed to go do a visit to someone that's in the hospital because, you're going in because the mother's having a baby or something like that, slightly different story. But, the life support thing, yeah. So.
Yeah. And so
that's a tough decision. That's a tough call to make on some of that.
Mm-hmm. All right, so here's another interesting one. This is probably one of the most interesting and bittersweet parts of the movie, I think. Every vocation has elements not intended by God due to living in a fallen world. Rowena presents Glenn with some temptations in his vocation as a teacher and as a husband. Does he handle them in the best way possible?
I would say, given the circumstances, yes, because he doesn't give in to the temptation, but yet I could see leading up to this that there are some times, and this from the scout training I've had, there are some times that he was in situations that could have been compromising, that started leading him down this little path. So did he make the right decisions ultimately? Yes, he did. But you could see that maybe there were some things that should have been changed along the line to limit that situation moving as far forward as it did.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. Some people might, say that when they were sitting in his room on the piano playing the song together alone, that some people might say that was a little too much, and
That,
maybe there should have been a third person in the room or something like that.
yeah,
And then when he ends up writing some music for her, and his wife says, "Oh, who's
yes,
Rowena?" and he gives a different answer, and then later on she is watching the play and she sees her name in the program, and then she realizes that that's who he was
that's,
writing the music
yep,
for.
that was a very uncomfortable situation. I was like, okay, that was, the way he handled that was not good. So yeah, there's, for the, like I said, for the most part he did okay, but there were some places like, that was not quite the best way to handle that.
And then I was just looking at some stuff on YouTube and on the internet in the past couple weeks, and it's interesting how at the end of the movie she doesn't come back. So we don't know after she goes to New York.
No,
We don't know whether she made it or if she didn't or what happened to her. But the big song that she sang before she left was that song "Someone to Watch Over Me,"
mm-hmm.
and at the end when they're at the bus stop, he gives her the address of a guy that he used to play in a band with, and you
Right,
could say that he was doing the best that he could. He was letting her go pursue her dream, but wasn't choosing to go along with her. Wasn't choosing to abandon his family in order to go with her, but
sure.
he was uh, getting her in line with somebody who would be able to get her started and give her some shelter and support to help her
Support, yep,
do what she wanted to do. So
yep,
it's like I said, it's pretty touching and bittersweet that we really don't get to know what happens to her after that.
sure, sure,
I
true.
think, I think the actress did a really good job. I wish that she had been in other movies. I don't think she's done very much since then.
No, the outstanding voice. If that was, I don't know that they dubbed her in or anything, but if they didn't, man, amazing.
Hmm.
Definitely, definitely good.
Yeah,
Very good. Very Broadway-ish talent.
right. Okay, so reflect on the lyrics. This is from that John Lennon song. Reflect on the lyrics. Life is what happens to you while you're busy making other plans. I think I found that to be true quite a few times throughout my own life, where you would expect that your life is going to go a certain way and you're going to do this and this and this in order to get to these results, and then
It
keep putting
doesn't.
you keep putting that on hold in order to do the sensible thing or to do things
Sure.
that help your neighbors around you. And one day you can wake up and feel like your life has been misspent, or that you never got to do the
Hmm.
thing you wanted to do, or the things that you thought would improve your life and improve the lives of others in the best way.
Yes, I've experienced that a few times where it's like, well, gee, this didn't go like I thought, and now what? Okay, So yeah, I've had some of that lately.
Hmm. And it's disappointing how we don't have the God spot. We can't see everything from God's perspective as far as why did this happen this way or why did that happen that way. And we know in Romans 8 how it says that God uses all the things in this life for the good, the ultimate good, but we
Sure.
don't get to see what a lot of those things are, and probably won't get to see a lot of them until the new creation. But you know, for the rest of us in the meantime, it can be hard to um, avoid those kinds of feelings.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And but if fortunately, sometimes there are some people who do get to experience what the end result is, and that's why it's great that they had the farewell party for him, to have him
Yes,
finally see that no, his life wasn't misspent, and all those
it
things that
made
he
a difference.
did accumulate to something, and all the people that he impacted.
And that's hard when you're a teacher because you don't necessarily see those kinds of things happen because, you know, other jobs you see the end result like fairly quick. You know, if you're making a product, you see start to finish what the product is. You know, you may look and okay, we have this part on this line, and okay, you put all these parts together, and now you got a car or an airplane or whatever. With teaching, you don't necessarily see that because you know you don't see the immediate impact that you necessarily make on someone. You may see it down the line, you know, but that may be years of that, or maybe you never get to see that. So you don't know as a teacher what your impact is on who you're working with necessarily.
And
And that's tough.
I was just reminded of something that somebody told me about how raising kids can be like that too, because I've had times where I've struggled with my own vocation as a parent, and someone told me how sometimes with men especially they like to see results or they want to know what the end goal is for something, and with raising kids there really is no definite end goal or where you can say I've accomplished what I've needed to do. There's always one more thing to do.
But yeah, it's an ongoing thing, and the only thing I took away or I take away as a parent and in goal, if you will, is to show Christ to my son, and that's where I'm looking. And you know, anything else along the line, you know, it all kind of melds into that. If you know, the end goal, as far as I'm concerned, is to make sure that he sees Christ and he's, you know, been equipped with what he needs for this life in terms of faith and whatever, laying the groundwork for that.
Yeah, one of my teachers at the seminary actually put out a DVD on fatherhood, and one of the things he talks about in there is how that's really the telos, the goal of parenthood, is to have children who will see Christ and who will come to know Christ and will be with us in the new creation, and that really is the ultimate goal that parents
Absolutely.
should have. And so it's not so much that you want your kid to become a millionaire or become a CEO or anything. You know, the most important goal is that.
And I remember with my dad was very adamant about making sure that, you know, he was going to church and he was baptized and he, you know, all of these things that, you know, from a very young age, because my parents were around until my son was in first grade going into second grade. And very adamant that, you know, he was in church all the time and he was baptized and, you know, all of these things to make sure, you know, he was going down the right path. So
it's good. So that would be a good example of them living out their vocation as grandparents. Of
absolutely, very much so. Good. Very, very much so.
Good. Okay, well, we're on the last question and we're just at the right time here for that. And we talked about this a little bit already. It says, reflect on the statement, the day they cut the football budget in this state, that will be the end of Western civilization as we know it.
Well, you're already going to know my answer. I strongly disagree with that. It's, you know.
Really?
I look at, well, I guess the bigger, let me retract it. The bigger statement here is if they're cutting a budget that's non-academic is what they're talking about. Now, if you just say you're cutting the football budget, then like, okay, with the emphasis that's made on sports, okay, I can kind of get why people would be upset with that. But at the same time, you could expand that to say, you know, the day they cut the arts budget, you know, then will be the end of Western civilization as we know it. That it would be more agreeable to, because that's more of the character side, the, you know, the other side of the coin of developing the person. So if they're talking about in a broad sense and not just football, then I would say, yeah, they're right. But if they're limiting it to just the sports, then a little bit of issue with that. Kind of along the line of what you said, resentful about about the sports. When you were growing up, the sports got more emphasis over the arts and such, and so that's where that comment was coming from.
Okay,
But
because for me, I think I remember the very first time I ever saw this back when I was in high school. I know that statement really resonated with me because in the small school I went to, that's what I really thought was happening, is that the arts were constantly getting pushed to the side and never getting the money or the recognition they should. And there was never any question that we got to have football, we got to have basketball and all
right,
these different sports. And so I really thought that that's kind of the way the world works, is that in high school, sports always take more precedence over things like
over, yeah,
but it could be that I just happened to go to a school that was really like that. And there maybe, this was back in 95, maybe things are different now where they are thinking about sometimes cutting sports budgets and stuff like that. But I know for me at the time that I heard it, it really made sense. But, and so like I said, for me, it took a long time where I could actually appreciate the good that sports do for people
right.
around them. Because
It's
now I do understand that having a coach is somebody who can build character, and
sure,
the whole
sure,
concept of
absolutely.
the whole
There's
concept of being on a team is good and important. But
absolutely
yeah,
there's all kinds of things you can get from doing sports. Just like it's another part of the part of the character development of a person to be on a sports team or to be in develop that whatever it is in the arts. All of that makes a well-rounded person. So but yeah, you know there's reason to agree and disagree with a statement, definitely. So
yeah, well,
it takes a village.
that's right. And I like what you said, but yeah, the whole person, you need all the aspects to be there to form yourself into a well-rounded and grounded person.
Absolutely.
Good. Well, I really enjoyed going through all this and
I
getting to
did too.
watch the movie bit by bit. And I know this is something I'm hoping to get to do in my field church next year, and something to do in my own congregation someday too, is to go through these kinds of things. And too bad that here for Vicarage we only got to really do this twice because of the
Right.
shutdown. But I'm glad you were able to make it, and
Oh, I
glad.
enjoyed it. Thank you for doing it. That
Cool.
was good. I really enjoyed it.
Good. Good. Well, I think we can have some prayer and close out.
Okay.
Dear Lord, thank you for bringing us to the close of this Bible study that we've been doing with this film, and thinking about the concept of vocation and how we all have many different ones, and how you show us ways that you want us to live those out, and how the fact that they exist are the ways that you want us to help people around us. And it doesn't mean having to do exotic and far reaching things, but just doing the everyday things that we normally do. That's how we serve our neighbor and live the way you would want us to live. So we thank you for movies like this that allow us to see that more clearly. And thank you for the opportunities that we have in our own lives to do such things. And we ask you to give us guidance as we continue with the vocations we have and the ones that we will have in the future. Pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much. It was good. I enjoyed it. You did a good job.
Thank you. Looking
Yep.
forward to doing more of these someday.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. Good deal. Thank you again.
Yep. Have a good one.
Yeah, you too.